All right, All the Things You Are by Jerome Kern is a timeless standard, and it's a song that is in everyone's repertoire. In this etude, All the Things We Are, we're going to just dive right in by using chords and bass lines right at the same time, right from measure one. So the way that this kicks off is using a lot of staccato figures like we've seen in the previous etudes and some repeating moves. So we see in the first two bars this same kind of move musically and physically on the guitar. We have 2 eighth notes on beat 1 followed by an offbeat on 3. And the move is kind of like we saw in Walking in Autumn, the Autumn Leaves etude, this minor 7 voicing using a bar, but releasing with the middle of the finger to make the chord sound staccato. Just by simply releasing and pivoting the middle part of the index finger. And as we move up with the bass line, we're going to duplicate that for the B flat minor. So it's the same exact move in both first position and in sixth position to capture both the F minor 7 and B flat minor 7 chords. For the E flat chord, you could play a dominant 7th chord, but since if we're moving at a brisker tempo, and due to the staccato nature of these chords, it's okay to use a different chord voicing that'll work. So in this case, we're going to use a 9 sus4. And that voicing sounds just fine, but the point is that you don't have to get into a straight E flat 7 chord voicing like this, or a 9 or a sharp 9 or anything. If physically you're moving at a tempo where you can't get there, it's okay because again, it's more the feel than the sound. I mean, obviously you have to play the right chord, but it's okay that you use a sus structure, which is a lot easier to physically articulate in this context because it's just using one finger. So say if we were moving at a faster tempo from the top, it's a lot easier for me from the B flat 7 to just go into keep that same fingering. That'll work just fine to convey the sound of the E flat, especially since the bass is nailing that root right on the head. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially if you play at faster tempos. For then we move down to the A flat, and what's interesting at the end of this measure, measure 4, we're using a tritone sub to chromatically approach the D flat major 7. And this is a nice way of doing it with a chord where we're outlining the A flat major 7 chord. And when we get on that D, we'll actually outline it with a full chord. And this is nice because, again, we have contrary motion. The chord is moving down, while the top note in the voicing is moving up. So it's contrasting or contrary motion is the name of it that they use. So that's a nice feature to use in your chord voicings. Let's take a look at that A flat major 7 for a second. There's 2 ways of fingering that. I think most people would finger that A flat major 7 chord as in this way. So we have 1, 3, 4, 2. That's generally the fingering that we learned when we first learned that chord. And that's fine, I think, depending on tempo. So here's another example of where the tempo of a piece can indicate what you use for a fingering. If the song was nice and slow, then we could use that fingering. But if we were moving at a quicker tempo, you may want to finger it in this way. So now I'm using the first finger to bar the 4th position and 2 and 3 there. And the reason why I would do that is that it's easier for my first finger to travel up to the C, which is the next note in the bass line, and then my pinky is right there ready to go in the E flat. So it's just this sort of pivot motion. We've got chord, next bass line there, next bass line there. And that gives me some time to get into the D9 chord. So that's just something to think about. In many cases when we're playing solo guitar styles or walking bass chord styles, you want to explore different fingerings. If something isn't coming out at the right tempo, then try to finger it in a new way. And this is a perfect example of modifying this chord from that fingering to this fingering, just to make it more practical for the bass line. Now we're suggesting a new tonal center with a C. And since we have 2 bars, 2 full measures of C, that gives us some room to stretch out on the bass line. So we're just moving to a low E. And then we go back to a C in measure 9, but this time it's a C minor tonality. We're going to start off with a nice C minor chord voicing. And we're using the same concepts that we've looked at before into this F minor 7. Now when we look ahead at the B flat, we're going to use a pedal tone just like we saw with the Autumn Leaves etude, but this time we're not going to keep the 5th going through the following major 7th chord. We'll just use it to set up just a little temporary static motion, and then we'll resolve it right up to the E flat from there. Now notice the first chord voicing is an E flat major 9. That's pretty standard. Now we're moving down. So then you might ask yourself, okay, well, I've landed on a C, which is going to connect to the B flat, but if I wanted to hit a chord, what could I use that will work over an E flat major tonality? And I don't really have, I suppose you could play just an E flat triad, but then that would work just fine. But you could also use a B flat triad. So an interesting exercise that you can do is, even though I'm thinking I'm in the world of E flat major right now, you can kind of put your hands in different areas of the fretboard and see, can I come up with a chord voicing that would capture the sound of this particular change that I'm on, regardless of where I am on the fretboard? So you could just kind of drop your finger down anywhere and say, okay, what about there? Oh, well, I could use this or this. What if I were there? Well, maybe this. And just as an exercise, do that. Find all of the E flat upper structures that you can find, regardless of where your low bass note happens to be. That's a nice little exercise. In this case, we're using a B flat triad, which is just kind of like another variation of the E flat major 9 sound. So we have this E flat major 9, and then we have this E flat major 9. So that's basically the sound that's capturing there, even though a C is in the bass. So you always have options wherever your hands are placed. From there, we move into measure 13, back to the A flat major 7 chord. Now here's an example of where you would want to use that modified fingering. And the reason is because our second note is an E flat. So if we were using this traditional fingering for A flat major 7, that takes a lot of effort to jump up to that E flat. So it would be a lot easier and keep the motion fluid and really flowing by using this fingering. Now my pinky is ready to go to just grab that E flat. And then the middle finger can slide right up 1/2 step into the A minor 7. And then the same thing for the G major 7. You could finger it like this, or you could just go into that fingering. So that's pretty much up to you, because either one will work. Again, where we're going, you always want to look to see where you're going, and this will happen. If you write something out, if you compose a bass line and chords, which I suggest you do as you're getting into this style, then you'll be able to visually see where you're going and then make decisions based on where you're going. But you'll also get to the point where you're improvising in this style. You'll intuitively know where you're going to go. You'll think, oh, I want to move down or I want to move up, and you'll be able to make those choices in a nanosecond in terms of how you're going to finger the chord that will enable you to flow from there. So in this case, the G major 7, we're looking at measure 15 again. We're moving down. So you could finger it either way, or the modified way. The choice is up to you. And then we're going to set up the following A minor 7 in bar 17 with a little 2/5. Now, in measure 18, we have another pedal tone that we saw in the Walking in Autumn etude. Now, notice what's happening here. We're kind of moving in and out of tension and release. So the chord changes from 17 through 20 are 2-5-1 of G major. So we have A minor 7 for a bar, D7 for a bar, and then G. And one nice way to navigate through these changes when playing solo guitar is to keep that pedal going and play these different chord structures on top, just like we saw in a previous etude. So we'll nail that A minor 7, and then we can stay on that sus, and then we can change up the sound by playing an altered voicing. And then there's your tension. Our resolution will be kind of like a G major 9 over D, kind of like a nice Steely Dan chord voicing. And then we could play like a G11. And all of these sounds just kind of fuse together, you know. I mean, it's simultaneously an A minor 9, you know, kind of sound. Or a D sus sound and a G11 sound. They're all the same sound, so it's kind of a nice thing to do to meld these different 2-5-1 sounds together in the context of a pedal tone. I really like the sound of that. So we're going from a G major 9 over D, G11 over D, then back into the sus, and then maybe a little cluster. And then we're off of that right up into a new tonal center of E major. So we're moving up to the F sharp half diminished. We've seen this voicing before. This is a B7 flat 9 in measure 22, but we're using a diminished 7th chord voicing on the 3rd, a D sharp. And then we go into the E major 9. And then we bring it home with a C7 sharp 5 chord that's going to set up our final phrase here with the F minor chord. So again, to signify the end of a phrase, you might want to do something. It could be anything, but in this case, in other words, instead of just moving through, have some sort of end of the phrase, you know, have a period or the end of a statement, something to let the listener know, and maybe another musician that you're playing with, such as a singer or a horn player, to let them know, okay, we're at the end of the phrase now, we're getting into a new section. So in this case, we're using that static concept to set the stage for the new section, which is the final section of the song beginning in measure 25. So let me just play it through from 17 to 24 real quick so you can hear it in context. Pedal. Now we've gone to a new place. Now we're setting the stage for the final section. Now, the bass line in the next few bars moves up to pretty high. It's a higher register. So, but notice how instead of going to the D string to grab those notes, we're going to just move right up into the upper register of the A string to, again, keep the sound of those low 2 strings engaged to, again, approximate the sound of a bass. So this works a lot easier if you have a cutaway. We're just going to move right up. B flat minor 11 voicing. We're just working through those basic chord voicings using our very common shapes of 13, major 9. And we see the same move in the A flat major 9 that we did earlier in the E flat major 9. So it's kind of like a sus over F, but that's approximating this sound of A flat major 9. We moved it back down to D flat major 7. Then it goes to a G flat dominant chord. Chromatic approach to C. Now this is kind of an interesting thing here. We have a repeating phrase with the chords that creates kind of a nice little rhythm that contrasts against this constantly moving 4 beat to the bar bass line here, from the C minor 7 in measure 31 to the B flat minor 7 in 33. So here's what it sounds like. So again, that really captures the sound of kind of like 2 people. It creates the illusion of 2 different people playing. So the rhythm is, and because we're really hitting on those offbeats against this constantly, forward-moving bass line, it creates a nice contrast, especially if you can pop those chord voicings, give them a staccato feel. It'll really sound like 2 people playing. Instead of sounding like this, it really sounds more like this, and those parts opening up. So again, that is. And just pop those chord voicings, and you may want to isolate each of those and just pop them. So with the C minor 7, Now, here's another example of a different fingering choice. I'm playing a minor 7 chord, but instead of using my first finger bar, as we've done with the A minor 7 and other chord voicings, I'm going to use a partial bar with my third finger and play the root with my middle finger. And the reason why, again, is where I'm going. I'm going to an E flat that I want to finger up here. So it makes sense for me to play that particular fingering for that chord voicing so I can easily get up to my next note. So once you plot that out with the bass and the chords together, then you can try popping the chords. And this one's actually easier to do because I can release the pressure with my third finger while holding down the middle finger. Then we go into the diminished chord, so maybe practice popping those 3 fingers. Now I'm into my fingering, the bar fingering for a minor 7 chord. Why? Because, again, depending on where the bass line is going, I'm walking up in this way. By now, at this point, we've worked through enough etudes that you're probably noticing a lot of same or similar bass patterns, and that's exactly what you should be observing. A lot of these same moves over and over again. I mean, there's a finite number of moves. Sometimes when you're getting into this style initially, it can be overwhelming, thinking, wow, how is it possible that people improvise in this style? Well, it's kind of like it's not infinite. There's only a few ways that you can work through a 2-5-1. Actually, there's more than a few. But after you get working and comfortable with a lot of these different patterns or movements or direct arcs, however you want to think about it, you'll find yourself using these patterns over and over again. And before you know it, you can freely improvise with this, as melodically as well as rhythmically, and you keep doing all of those variations in the prep exercises, then you'll be able to have a command and just, drop in a chord jab in the same way that a pianist would with his or her right hand, or a drummer, or any instrument. Becomes very organic in that way. So these patterns will become part of your vocabulary that you'll then be able to drop in at any time you want. So let's finish this off here. We've done our move from 33 to 34 that we've seen before. Again, I'm going to use my sus voicing for the 5. Why? Because it's easy. It's there. The first finger's ready to go. I'm not going to make it too complicated. And then we'll resolve to the A flat. Or you can finger it this way. And then we're just going to end off the song. Again, here's another example of something that you might do to end the song. Or, maybe this could be a solo break. And what we're doing is just playing around with the chords. F, G diminished 7 moving into A flat 6. Now, if you wanted to end the song with a relative major, A flat, that could be a way to get into it. But we're taking it to another place, and here's another example of constant structure using a minor 11 voicing. That's really nice. It sounds great in these songs in a jazz style, and it's physically easy to play. It's just a partial bar with a middle finger. So again, you're basically harmonizing this melody with constant structure. And then just, any kind of a solo line to get out of it. And then maybe end it with a 6-9 chord.